We'll get started.
So good morning, everyone. I'm Mary Preenon. I'm the Director of Communications for the Hudson Gateway Association of Realtors. And thank you all for joining us this morning. We have a really exciting presentation from New York Presbyterian Medical Group. It's a new year, so we're going to talk about a new year, a new you, and how we can all live healthier, which I certainly know I need some advice on that. And our presenter today is Dr. Wu. And I'll just tell you a little something about Dr. Wu. He is an endocrinologist. Let me pronounce this right. Endocrinologist, thank you, at New York Presbyterian Medical Group, Westchester, and is board certified in endocrinology, diabetes, and metabolism. After graduating from SUNY Downstate College of Medicine, Dr. Wu remained there to serve both his residency and fellowship. He is a member of the American Medical Association, the Endocrine Society, and the American Association of Clinical Endocrinologists. Boy, I'm having a tough time, Dr. Wu, saying your profession there. But good morning, and we're so happy to have you this morning.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I don't feel bad about the pronunciation. I actually went to a Russell Peters comedy show, and my wife got me tickets, and when I was with her, we were in the first row, and obviously they picked on me because I was Asian. He's like, "So what do you do?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm an endocrinologist." He's like, "A what?" And you know your parents can't pronounce that, right? I was like, yeah, so yeah, it happens, unfortunately. All right, but I'm very happy to be here. So essentially, when Dr. Rodriguez approached me for a talk on nutrition, my first response was, "Well, I'm not a nutritionist, right? It's a whole separate field of training." He said, "Well, you're an endocrinologist. You deal a lot with weight loss management and diabetes. If there's something you can, help out with the group in terms of how they can eat better, maybe do better with their weight loss, diet, things like that." I said, "Yeah, I have this is actually a talk that I originally gave to the VA population. They had a program called the Move Clinic where there are different levels of weight loss and nutrition. And this is kind of like a level 2 discussion where we have a more formal lecture in terms of what you can do about nutrition, diet, exercise, weight loss. So originally meant for that group of population, but it's fairly good for, for the general population, I feel. So I'm going to give a short talk about, nothing long, about 20, 25 minutes. And then we will have some time for questions at the end. If you have any personal questions you want to ask about nutrition, either with yourself, if you don't mind sharing that with the rest of the group, or if you want to ask, generalized questions you want to ask for other people as well. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll go over the talk. Let's see, share screen. All right. Can everybody see the lecture? Gotcha. All right, great. So, as you mentioned, my name is Dr. Wu. I am actually an assistant professor at Columbia University Irving Medical Center. And when I signed my contract, I was told that I am officially a doctor for Columbia, but I am leased out to New York Presbyterian. I was thinking, you're making me sound like I'm a car here, but I've come to accept that. But officially, I'm through Columbia, but I work for NYP. And this will be a talk for diet and weight loss and kind of some principles that I use in my practice and things I think would, benefit the general population. So I think the main thing that we have to get to is that weight loss and diet and exercise kind of comes from fundamental principles that we have to obey in terms of universal law. So it comes back to physics, essentially. I know we've all been familiar with this equation in some way, shape, or form. It was a terror for us back from my New York City regions. But, it's a famous equation made by Einstein. And essentially what it says that energy is equal to mass times the speed of light squared. Now, I'm not getting into the nitty gritty of how he came to that or what that means from like a physics, quantum mechanical standpoint. But the general idea with this equation is that energy and mass cannot be created and it cannot be destroyed, but it can be interconverted between the two. And that's where diet and weight loss comes in. Pretty much every food that you take in will be broken down into energy, and that energy will be either stored as other forms of energy or it will be transformed into mass in terms of, various energy storage masses that the body makes, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But the idea is that pretty much everything you take in, something has to happen to it. Energy just doesn't magically disappear. There's no magic pill to make you lose weight and have the energy go nowhere, essentially. Everything is interconverted. I want to get into kind of, a little bit about how that works. There will be a small amount of math. We're not the best with math, but a small amount of math just kind of give you some general ideas. It won't be like any sort of differential equations or anything. Now, examples of energy that we kind of take in terms of food. So we take in everything in the form of physical energy. We're not plants, unfortunately, so we don't do photosynthesis. We can't use petroleum because we are not, engines, but we take energy in the form of food, essentially. Now, with food, our body has an amazing biomechanical process that changes the food through cellular respiration into other forms of chemical energy. And to some degree, biomass is kind of how we grow up, but mostly into cellular energy that we use, especially as adults. Now, the energy that we can convert into, there's really four main types of energy that our body converts the chemical energy from food into what our body uses on a day-to-day basis. So there's mechanical energy. That's the energy that we're probably most familiar with. We walk around, we exercise, any sort of physical motion that we do becomes mechanical energy. That's one form of energy that we convert the chemical energy into. Another form that we probably know about but don't think about on a constant basis is thermal energy. So part of what we do as warm-blooded organisms is the energy that we take in, we use to keep our body heated, and that is actually a fairly large amount of energy that we use in terms of our intake. A lot of it's really more of waste energy. So a lot of the energy that we use for mechanical energy or for cellular respiration, a lot of it is heat that gets generated from the chemical reaction that keeps our body warm. And essentially what it comes down to, it keeps our body running at the optimum temperature so that all of our enzymes and processes can work. This is supposed to represent growth energy. Actually, can you guys see my cursor? Yes, okay, perfect. So I want to double check that. So over here, it represents growth energy, essentially. So not a constant thing, we don't grow forever and ever. It's really more of kind of, when we're younger, into our teenage years, but this, when it's happening, represents a good amount of energy usage, because to convert energy into mass, and keep in mind that when we take in food, it's not a direct conversion where the food just tacks onto our body. It goes through a large form of energy conversion. It gets converted into the proper molecules that actually grows our body in terms of bone, muscle, fat, cellular walls. So there's a lot of conversion, but converting energy to mass uses a lot of energy. It will become more of a point later on, but this happens, during only a short period of our lives. From a more like a day-to-day basis, it's just really going to be more for not so much growth, but for repair also. So as we go through our day, we damage stuff, linings of our stomach, linings of our esophagus, muscle damage, skin changes, any, cuts or scrapes. The body has to expend energy to create back those tissue that was damaged, essentially. And I thought this is probably, it's just to be accurate, but there's electrical energy that is generated from all the food that we eat, and the electrical energy is used to send impulses to control things like our muscles, our nerves, allows us to think, allows us to feel. Not a very large amount of energy expended toward the electrical energy, but it's still a reasonable amount, and it does show about the energy conversion, essentially. Now, these are the forms of energy that we mostly take in and what we use to kind of interconvert and use as energy sources for our body. So I was originally a biochemist back in undergraduate. And what they said for biochemistry, the main part of that is, and I really like what my professor said, was that biochemistry is where chemistry and biology meet, and the interconversion between chemistry and biology is where kind of the magic happens. So this is actually what this first molecule represents. So what I'm trying to show here is ATP, stands for adenylene triphosphate. This is a amino acid, and this is the triphosphate, essentially. Now, this is your most basic form of energy. So all the food that you take in, when your body wants to make that into energy, it will convert it in some way to this molecule, either by making the molecule or making this final bond here between these two phosphates. So this is a hugely intricate and very elegant process. So the body will actually take energy, and using the energy, they will force this last phosphate onto this molecule adenylene diphosphate. So notice that there's 2 phosphates here, there's 3 phosphates here. For this phosphate to be added on to form this final bond here requires an extreme amount of chemical and or mechanical energy. So there's a kind of a cellular and molecular machine that will take this last phosphate and force it together to this phosphate, forming triphosphate. Now, when the body needs to use energy, this last bond is very unstable. It breaks apart and releases the energy so the body can use it to form whatever function it may need to do, either chemical synthesis or motion or mechanical energy or cellular energy in terms of making a gradient to help the electrical energy. So this is the bond that makes everything happen, kind of where the magic happens essentially. Now, the other key thing about this molecule is that it is extremely, extremely unstable and thus very, very short acting. If you were to take all of the ATP molecules in your entire body, and we're talking about billions, if not trillions of molecules, you will use that all up within about a couple of seconds. Very short acting, kind of at the very end phases of what your energy usage is. A much larger form of energy is stored in the form of glucose. Now, glucose, well, sugar is the better example. Glucose is the actual molecule it's here. But glucose and the various components is what the body uses through cellular respiration to break down and form the components to make ATP. So this is going to be the next step up. Also, relatively short acting. Not as bad as ATP, but again, if you were to use all of the glucose up in your body, we're talking about in the order of minutes, 3 to 4 minutes, depending on what you're doing, essentially. Now, that's where the next step comes in. This is a starch, essentially. And what a starch is a very, very long chain of various forms of glucose molecules. So what ends up happening is that the body will slowly break off this last molecule of glucose, use that to make glucose, use that to make ATP. But because these are very, very long chains, it breaks down much more slower. And this, I don't think you can completely deplete your body's entire amount of starch in any significant period of time, unless you're actually starving for weeks and weeks and weeks. But usually the body will use this for the order of, like tens of minutes. So 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. This is what the body uses in forms of energy in terms of starch. Now, long-term wise, I didn't put this here because this gets more into biochemistry, but the liver has a form of starch called glycogen, and that's what the body uses when it starts to run low in terms of starch in the bloodstream. So the body senses that your starch is going to be dropping in the bloodstream. It goes through a very large chemical process, and then the liver starts with glucogen, which is a type of starch that the liver stores, and that replenishes the starch supplies in the body. That's going to be more of a intermediate time frame usage. So you'll use up most of your glycogen in probably about a day, more or less, and the body will regulate how much of that to put out into the bloodstream from the liver. Also, if you have any sort of excess starches or excess sugars, the body will make the glycogen for kind of medium-term storage. Now, the last thing I think is what gets a lot of attention, but this is supposed to represent a fatty acid, and that represents the fats in our body. Now, that really represents your long-term energy storage. This is a scenario where when people are in starvation mode and they're on a desert island for 3 weeks, and you're wondering if there's no food but they got water, how do they survive? It's through fat. This is a very stable, long-term, very high energy source, very energy dense. So this allows your body to survive for long periods of time without any food, and that's your kind of your energy store essentially. I had a roommate in college, very, very fit person, very good with nutrition. And when he was starting to get a little bit of a gut towards the end of college, he pointed, he was like, yeah, this is my energy stash right here. I use it for when I'm running out of energy. So yeah, this is your long-term energy stash. Also, probably the hardest thing to get rid of in terms of weight loss, because, again, going back to the original equation, every energy you take in will either become other energies or other sources of body tissue. Fat is what the body prefers to use it for long-term storage. Now, the evolutions of nutrition, we kind of have to keep in mind that when we started out as a species, not so much as a civilization, but as a species, food and energy was not easy to come by. We're thinking back to caveman days. Essentially, we were hunter-gatherers, and your choices in food intake was either to hunt down another animal, which takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of cooperation. Developing weapons definitely help with that. but very, very energy heavy, or through gathering of small amounts of food. So like berries, leaves, don't know they have bees back then, but maybe honey if you were able to get them, but gathering a small amounts of food. But back at that point, the body was set up to do two main things. One was to retain as much energy as possible, and two was to be as efficient as possible in terms of energy usage, because you never know when the next meal is coming. Primarily hunting, you have to follow a herd of animals. You don't know when you're going to be able to knock down one of those animals to eat. You don't know what the crops are going to be. Again, you're kind of depending on what the natural process is with the land in terms of getting your nutrients. So the body becomes very, very good at using energy. So the body is very efficient at those mechanical movements that we have. And also the body will find ways to retain energy. There's probably two main forms that the body retains energy. One is the fact of the stomach. So the stomach is essentially at this point, still a giant sack, essentially. You eat the food, it stayed there, it slowly gets digested, and it gives you energy until you can get that next meal, essentially. Usually a couple of hours, maybe a day, but it gives you kind of like a intermediate term storage of large amounts of food to store until you can get that next meal. And then again, there's fat that the body makes for kind of long-term extended periods, a couple of days, a week, ideally, until you start to burn some of your fat supplies, in case there is the herd runs a little bit further, or there's a fire or something wipes out the local berry crop or something along those lines. But the body's going to be very good at saving energy and also very good at using up the energy. Now, the three main periods in terms of, I would say, nutritional intake is going to be part of the Paleolithic period, the agricultural period, and the Industrial Revolution. I'll talk about why each one is important. So again, the Paleolithic period, that is kind of where our entire evolution started in terms of energy and nutrition. So again, the body tries to hold on to energy, hold on to it as long as possible. At that point, we didn't worry about problems such as being overweight or diabetes or lipid problems, because if you don't get enough energy to live for a month, you're just going to die. So there was no selection against this process of getting too much energy. Our main goal was find some way to evolutionarily survive with the low energy availability that we have, so you can make it to the next day, so you can reproduce and pass on your offspring. So that kind of sets the stage for why things happen the way they are now. Now, the next main stage is the agricultural revolution. This is going to be around the 17th and 19th century. That's when, as a species, we really learned farming techniques, essentially. So we went away from this, hunting large animals, following herds, and picking up little berries as the land growth. And we really figured out how to domesticate animals and how to farm large areas of land to meet the needs of humans as a species, essentially. Now, as you can tell, in the Paleolithic period, our focus was more on protein, fiber, maybe a small amount of grains, because that's just what we ate as hunters and gatherers. Once we went more to an agricultural standpoint, we figured out that it's much easier and much cheaper to grow plants than it is to farm animals, essentially. So a lot of our dietary intake focused more onto grains and later on cereal, but more of a plant-based diet, very much higher in carbohydrates, essentially. Did we eat animals at that point? We definitely did, but much more difficult to come by just due to the pure cost of raising an animal. Much cheaper to plant a field of wheat than it is to raise raise like a cow or a sheep or a pig or something. Actually, even by today's standards, if you were to look at biomass conservation, I think you need about hundreds of pounds of biomass to raise like 1 pound of protein in terms of meat, essentially. So again, just due to availability, we ate much more carbohydrates at that point. Now, the next phase of our kind of nutritional evolution is the Industrial Revolution. This is really where we get into the modern era. And there are three main phases at this point. There is the phase of the steam engine, the phase of science and mass production, and kind of the digital technology era. Now, the steam engine is important because the steam engine allowed us to deal with a lot of those kind of labor-intensive tasks. So keep in mind that farming, back then, farming by hand, very, very labor-intensive. You ate a lot of carbohydrates, but you ate the carbohydrates because you had to use the carbohydrates. People were not very large at that means, at least not the majority of people. We look at pictures of, aristocrats and royalty. They didn't have to do much work, luckily. So, they didn't use up their calories. But the average person that's, working on the field, trying to get by, either they had problems accessing the calories that they needed, or they used a lot of calories. Now, with the induction, the discovery of the steam engine, a lot of those labor-intensive works, plowing, gathering food, processing food, became more mechanized, essentially. So it allowed for the next step, which is the mass production. So mass production allowed us to make very, very large amounts of food. And honestly, at this point, we're going to a phase where energy and food becomes less of a problem. So it becomes, smaller amounts of world, especially in the more I'll say more modernized areas, had problems accessing nutrients and accessing the amount of calories that they actually needed. So we have large amounts of food, and then leading to the next problem, which is the digital era. So with further advances in technology, we're really shifting more away from kind of physical labor to more either intellectual or service-based labor, where you don't require large amounts of energy to do what you need to do. You're really more of kind of doing more advanced types of work where you're thinking stuff, working through processes. I'm sure you guys have to work to navigate a very large, complicated process in terms of selling home. My house just finally went into contract, and that was a long process. So more intellectual, but you're not physically there trying to build a house, essentially. So we're shifting more towards a more intellectual work, which requires much less energy. And that's where the problem comes in. Now I have a mismatch of we have a high amount of energy and very low usage. And that's where, again, setting the stage from the beginning, our body is set to retain as much energy as possible. You have a high mismatch where you don't use up the energy, but the body is very good at maintaining it. And that's where kind of, all the weight and weight gain and problems with excess energy comes in. Now, in terms of math, now, when I went to medical school, they told us in our opening speech, they told us that essentially, we know you're very smart and we know you're very bad at math. Because if you were smart and you were good in math, you would be in business, you wouldn't be in medicine. So I promise to keep the math, as minimal as possible. But this is just more or less to illustrate just, how much energy are we talking about when we take in various forms of food. So carbohydrates, these are your things like, your rice, your bread, your pastas. This is the main form of energy that our body has kind of evolved to use. But what carbohydrates comes down to is that per gram of carbohydrate, you're getting about 4, now this is officially known as kilocalories, but 4 kilocalories per gram of carbohydrate. Actually, a very similar type of intake with protein. So per gram of protein, you're getting also about 4 grams of kilocalories. Now, when you get the fats, you see the main difference there. So when you take in fat, you're actually taking about 9 kilocalories per gram. So what this kind of what I'm trying to illustrate here is that for the same amount of food that you're eating per weight, if you're taking in protein and carbohydrates, you're getting much less calories than if you're taking in fat. The other two is just really demonstrating for other purposes. The water, there is no calories in water. And that's water by itself. When you start putting stuff in, it's a much different process. But water by itself has no calories. So drink as much water as you want. Probably shouldn't go beyond, like 16 cups of water per day. But drink as much water as you want. You're not going to get any calories from that. Water is also very important for actually burning calories. This whole, this whole process of cellular metabolism and cellular respiration, that all requires water to run properly. Fiber, I've gotten kind of like mixed results with fiber in terms of my search and how many calories it has. Fiber, depending on which person you go to for definition, is defined as carbohydrates that are not readily usable, which means that the body cannot use it directly. So it goes anywhere from 0 to 2 calories. There are certain things that are, people think of traditionally as fiber, such as cellulose. These are things that are found in cell walls on plants. They are just completely not usable by people whatsoever. You can't break that down. That really goes into more of the 0 calories. But fiber is very low in calories. The other good thing about fiber is that it is very, very slowly digested. So again, thinking back to that original scenario where our body is storing energy, the stomach only understands one thing. Distension. So the stomach feels full when it's distended, when there's stuff inside, and when it's not distended for a long period of time, it feels hungry. Fiber stays in the stomach for long periods of time. It doesn't get digested easily. It keeps you fuller for a long period of time, fighting that urge for hunger and urge for eating, essentially. Now, the other key thing I want to point out between carbohydrates and protein is that the body uses carbohydrate as a main form of energy. Protein can be used for energy, but that is, again, in the starvation mode. So again, we're on that island, you have no food. The body can, through various biochemical processes, change protein into energy at the cost of the protein of your body. Those are your muscles. This is not something the body likes to do. So when we take in protein, what the body likes to do with it, it likes to store it and use it in terms of repair to the body. So, any muscle damage, any damage to your intestinal lining, the body uses the protein primarily for that. And if it has to, it will use it as an energy source. But primarily the body will use carbohydrates as your energy source, fat being storage. Now, this is a food pyramid. And this is a representation of the original food pyramid that the USDA used. And I had to search pretty hard to find this one because it's not used anymore. But when I was growing up, and I'm in my mid-30s here, so when I was growing up, this is a pyramid that we got in our, elementary school, middle school. Generally, the bottom of the food pyramid represents which you should be taking the most. The top represents the least intake. And back then, the thought process was that, carbohydrates are our main source of energy. You have to take in the most carbohydrates so you have the energy to work through the day. And at that point, it made perfect sense. There wasn't an obesity epidemic at that point. So you take in grains, use your energy, that's your main intake. Next step level up on the food chain, you have your vegetables and your fruits. Those you get your vitamins mostly from, you get a little bit of roughage from them, but less servings because they're not as energy rich essentially. Next up is going to be your dairy products and your meats, proteins. That again is going to be mostly for protein. Again, not the most energy rich. You don't need as much of it. Again, the proteins are used more for maintenance purposes. The minerals are the nutrients that you need from the dairy products. Those are going to be used more again for maintenance purposes, like building up your bones, stuff along those lines. So you don't need a lot of those smaller intake. And at the very tip, that's when you have your fats, your oils, your sweets. Apparently it was used sparingly. I recall specifically being told, hey, you can take a small amount every day. So like half a serving per day. And again, this is what I grew up in, what I'm guessing most people in their, 30s to 50s probably have in the back of their mind, because that's what we were taught in school, essentially. I think they officially stopped using it back in 2005, but fairly, this was kind of gone out of favor. And the reason being is that as we kind of went with this diet, people tend to focus more on the carbohydrates for a couple of reasons. One, and also for the fats, actually. So one, from the evolutionary standpoint, we are drawn towards high-calorie foods. Thinking back towards the hard-to-get calories, if we tasted something sweet, if we tasted something fatty, again, very high-calorie foods, very easy access to energy, our body has a evolutionary predisposition towards liking those things. That's why we like sweet foods. That's why we like rich foods. That's why we like, fatty foods, essentially. I personally have never liked fatty foods for whatever reason. I do like the sweet foods. So our body is naturally drawn to both carbohydrates and fats and sugars. And what's happened, again, with this evolution of lower energy expenditure, higher calorie availability, weight gain became more of a problem, leading to other problems such as cholesterol problems, diabetes problems, hypertension, a whole bunch of other issues. So they've kind of revised this pyramid. So more recently, this is more of an updated pyramid of what the USDA recommends. So back on the bottom, instead of grains and carbohydrates, they're recommending more fruits, vegetables, mostly fruits and vegetables. And the reason being is that these things provide higher nutrients per calorie intake, and they're also lower in calories. So going on to the vegetables, we're really talking about more of stalky and leafy vegetables. So things like carrots, broccoli, peas I'll get into. I'm not too happy about the peas picture. Tomatoes are technically a fruit, but we count them as vegetables in salads. Now, the thing about this is that leafy and stalky vegetables are very high in fiber, very low in carbohydrates. Certain vegetables that we think of traditionally as vegetables, things such as peas, corns, potatoes, plantains, traditionally, people do think of them, and maybe culturally they're thought of as vegetables, but actually very, very high in carbohydrates. As a general rule that I tell my patients also is that anything that can be made into like a sticky or a mushy consistency is very high in carbohydrates, because it's the carbohydrates and those sugar chains that gives it that sticky and mushy consistency. When we're talking vegetables, we're really talking more of, again, leafy or stalky vegetables, so either leafy or crunchy vegetables. Again, it's the fiber that gives it that crunch, and again, high fiber, low calorie content. In terms of cellulose, you're probably talking about 0 calories at that point, and also very slowly digested. It keeps you full for longer periods of time. Fruits are good because fruits do have higher amounts of sugar and higher amounts of carbohydrates there, but they also give you other nutrients and vitamins, not so much minerals, more vitamins, and they also have more fiber in them than just the general carbohydrates that we tend to intake. Juices here, not the best, because juices are actually usually very, very concentrated forms of fruit. So they essentially take all the fiber out, they filter out all the sugar, because that's what, again, we like sugar, so we like to drink the sugar, and it gives that to you in the form of a juice. So very, very energy dense. A lot of the times for most of the commercial fruits, they will add sugar in there to make it sweeter. Again, if you just had normal orange juice, you're talking maybe 7 to 8 grams of sugar. Once you have your Tropicanas, if you're simply orange juice, when they're adding sugar in there, it's going from 7 grams to about 10 grams of sugar. So much, much higher in energy, and very easy to actually uptake. Much easier to drink stuff than it is to actually eat stuff. It just takes longer to eat, much quicker to drink. So you're having liquid forms of energy very quick. But again, if you have like 1 or 2 cups of juice a day, not the end of the world. Ideally, you want to avoid adding excess sugar to them. So keep that in mind when you're making those choices. This is really more of a discussion for diabetics. So, if you're not a diabetic, it doesn't really apply too much to you, but certain fruits tend to be higher in sugar and energy than other fruits. So for example, fruits that are higher in fiber, lower in calories tend to be things such as kiwis, berries, the green apples, and berries, literally any sort of berries, strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, very high in fiber, very low in sugar, keeps you full, and, very low energy content. Those are better choices. Fruits that tend to be a little bit higher in sugar, maybe not as high in, they have a decent amount of fiber, but higher in sugar tend to be things, unfortunately, most of the tropical fruits that taste good. So things like grapes, pineapples, mangoes, any sort of melons, unfortunately, watermelon, honeydew, cantaloupe, bananas, those all tend to be much higher in sugar and compared to some of the other fruits. So you can eat them, but you want to try to keep that maybe towards the lower side, not so much, I wouldn't recommend eating bananas, like 5-6 times a day. You have like 1 banana every other day, not the end of the world. I wouldn't recommend having like a banana, then having like a watermelon, then a cantaloupe, and having some mango at the end of the day. It's better than, just say having, a bunch of, fried burgers, but it wouldn't be better, say you threw in a couple of kiwis or berries in that diet, essentially. But again, the current model recommends that you focus a lot on the vegetables and the fruit, not so much on the grains. Now, again, this is a model that's meant for everybody in the US, meant to be easy. So for the people that is doing more kind of manual work, they still have the grains here as kind of your second tier, because again, this is what our body is used to utilizing in terms of energy. The body processes it very well. And, if you were a farm worker, or if you were doing more physical work, like, moving pallets all day long, manually, you do need this excess energy because your body will use that up. So these are things like your breads, your pastas, in terms of vegetables, your potatoes, your corn, your peas, very high in carbohydrates, very good if you actually will use those carbohydrates. Other thing they recommend with this is actually darker grains, because when you're looking at darker grains and kind of like darker carbohydrates and lighter carbohydrates, it shows about just how much has been processed. Generally speaking, the lighter carbohydrates are more refined. And if you think back that starch strain, they tend to be more of a linear strain. So pretty much just one straight chain of glucose molecules. And when the body uses that, it accesses that very quickly. So it takes off that one end, it's used up, takes off the next end. It's very similar for the body to snatch off a very long linear chain of carbohydrates. When you're getting more into the darker carbohydrates, one, there's more fiber involved in them. So the calories are not as dense and it'll keep your body fuller. But the carbohydrates in darker grains tend to be more complex. Instead of being one long linear chain, they have branches that come off, every so often. Now the body can use that up, but it is much, much slower at using that up. And that serves a couple of purposes. For me as an endocrinologist and as a diabetes doctor, the body will not use that carbohydrate to flood the bloodstream altogether at once with a high amount of sugar. So it doesn't give you these sugar spikes that diabetics have problems dealing with. But also even from a general population, when you have more complex carbohydrates, you don't spike the sugar and it drops all of a sudden. And when that happens, your body tends to feel pretty bad. You feel very tired. You also get hungry more frequently. They then tends to cause you to eat a little bit more. So when you're having these darker carbohydrates, the sugar doesn't spike. You don't tend to get hungry as much. You stay fuller for a longer period of time. And it's just generally better for the body because it gives you a more stable release of sugar over a longer period of time. So you're not inclined to eat as much, as quickly. Now the next step up is going to be, again, your dairy products. This is really more for minerals. And I think this actually came about because they found that, osteoporosis, osteopenia has been a long problem. So they really want you to take more minerals in terms of calcium mostly. That's where kind of dairy comes in. Keep in mind that also with dairy products, keep in mind the fat content. It's very hard to separate dairy from fat. Skim milk is a very good option. I've done a lot of investigating into this, and people. The main concern I hear about skim milk is it doesn't taste as good as regular milk. Again, because there's less fat in there, and again, our body has the predisposition for wanting fatty material. But in nutrient-wise, skim milk is probably more nutritious compared to regular milk because it concentrates the nutrients because now you don't have that fat as part of the skim milk. So skim milk is a good option. Yogurts are a good option. Cheeses, I would say in limited amounts because cheese, you really cannot separate cheese from fat. It kind of loses. If you're going to separate cheese from fat, my mom says, I'd rather just drink the skim milk at that point because it doesn't really taste too well as low-fat cheese. But try to limit your intake of cheese, or if you're okay with it, low-fat cheese is better. Protein, again, more from protein is really more of a repair process for most adults. Kids need it to grow, but adults need it just for general repair processes. You don't need as much protein. That actually reduces about 2 servings per day. And then, fats, small amounts, really more for kind of like dressing your food, giving it some taste so you can eat it, salads, salad dressing. Try to really limit the amount of fats that we like to take in. And on the very top, these are high in sugar, high in salt. Salt for blood pressure is used, not so much for nutrition, but high in sugar, high in salt, high in fats. Not every day. So that's a very big distinction. Again, when I was growing up, I was told, small amounts on a daily basis. And this, as a treat thing, special holidays, if it's a birthday, New Year's, Thanksgiving, Christmas. That's why the winter months are always the problem for us. Those special occasions tend to happen most towards the end of the year. But special occasions, it's fine to have a little snack like this, but shouldn't be a daily basis. Again, very high in sugar. They're very, very highly densely packed in energy. I guess if you're in the military, I know you really you can eat this, but for the average person, this is not something you should be having on a daily basis. So yeah, this is a revised food pyramid. Again, high focus on vegetables and fruits. Less so much on carbohydrates. Protein and dairy, I'll say that's probably going to be about the same. The main difference is that a little more focus on dairy, a little more focus on dairy, a little less focus on protein. Definitely trying to push away at the fats and the highly processed foods, essentially. Okay, now, other thing I recall being told when I was younger was that 2,000 calories per day is your intake, and you're good with that, keep that, you should be fine in terms of weight. That, as they found out, is still true, but applied more to a growing teenager. Again, when you're growing, a lot of energy has to be converted to form that body mass of yours, growing bones, growing muscles, growing your brain, growing tissue. It's not just the energy to take in, that energy has to be converted between different forms of energy and different types of tissue. And every time you convert stuff, there's always a loss of energy. For example, car engines can get maybe 40 to 50% efficiency, and that is extraordinarily well. Our body can get up to about 60% efficiency for energy conversion. So, and that's extremely effective. But again, you do lose a lot of energy in that conversion. But again, 2,000 calories, great for a growing person. You need that calorie to grow, essentially. All of your excess calories you're using to grow the body. Now, once we become adults, that doesn't tend to work out as well because we're not growing anymore. Maybe a little bit for maintenance, but you use much less energy for maintenance than you do for actually developing the body. So these are the age ranges. Now, keep in mind that these ranges are for maintaining your weight. It's not for losing weight. So if you want to keep your weight the way it is, these are the calories that you want to take in to keep your weight where it is and not change, essentially. And they also break them into different activities. So sedentary is literally, I'm on vacation, I'm in bed, I got up to eat something, I got up to use the bathroom, I watched some TV, room service came, I got a massage. Very, very minimal amounts. Moderate activity will be kind of, your normal day-to-day basis. You're getting up, you go to work, you walk around at the office, you walk to new locations, you walk back from work, you do some light exercise for half an hour. Active tends to be people who are physically doing, like physical labor. We're talking about contractors, construction people, people who move pallets of foods physically on, hand carts, all day long. These are very, very active people. And, it reflects that. men tend to have a little more calorie allotment than women, mostly because men, and again, not me being sexist, men tend to engage more in physical activity. Also, men tend to be larger, so you take a little more calories to maintain your weight for a larger body mass than you do if you're a little bit more on the smaller side. Now, keep in mind that the activity is a big thing here. For example, if you look at calorie intake for military personnel, if you ever looked in the calorie content of I don't know if anybody's in the military, but if you have MRE packets, they have about 15 to 2,000 calories in that packet, because when you're in active combat and you're literally fighting for your life, you require 3 to 4 to 5,000 calories a day, depending on what the temperature is. So your activity plays a big role in what this calorie intake is. So you can tell from 1,800 calories to 1,800 calories to 2,400 calories, depending on your activity level. How do you calculate your calories? This is probably the thing that is very tedious initially and very hard to do. So what I have told patients is, and then again, I gave this lecture, I think I started giving a lecture maybe 7-8 years ago. Go to Google. Google is great for a lot of things. Literally Google in calories in and type in your food. There is a 90% chance you will get a reasonable estimate of what the calories are. Now, if you have the access to the nutrients, if you have those nutrition labels on, the packet of food, definitely use that. That's going to be most accurate. The company has spent, probably millions of dollars to estimate how many calories are in that food, probably at the direction of the of the FDA. But they spend a lot of money to figure out how many calories are in there. One thing to keep in mind with the packets of food is that there's a serving size and there's calories per serving and nutrients per serving. So for example, the example I gave back then was that if you had a bottle of Snapple tea, they'll say, it's 120 calories per serving, which sounds great because when you look in a bottle of soda, it's 140 calories per serving. Okay, great, less calories. But a bottle of Snapple tends to be about 24 ounces. A bottle of soda is about 14 ounces. So that 140 calorie for the soda is in that one can, whereas the Snapple is usually about 1.5 to 2 servings. So in actuality, if you're drinking the whole bottle of Snapple, you're really getting twice the number of calories. So when you're looking at the nutrition labels for the the food item, make sure you're checking to see how many servings there are and what's the size of the serving. A lot of times when you get like a bag of rice or Uncle Ben's or something, it'll say, one serving is 20 grams and this box has 80 grams of rice essentially. So if you're eating that whole box, whatever calories you have to multiply that by 4 essentially, because again, it's the calories per serving, not calories per the whole box. I think in the last couple of years, some companies, the more responsible ones, have been actually putting in, well, this is the calories per serving and this is the calorie per per content. So they might have that for you. It might make it a little bit easier. They don't like to do that because again, people are much more health conscious at this point, but some companies will do that for you. But I'll show you an example of the calories in. So I put a hyperlink here. Don't know if it'll work, but let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay. Can you guys see the Google page now? Okay, perfect. So literally just type in calories in, and it'll say, for example, you want to do calories in, lettuce. So you punch it in, and it'll say, and it'll give you very good examples here. So lettuce, green leaf, 1 cup, which is 36 grams, has about 5 calories. And you can, modify this based on what you're having. So if you're having, like a salad and you don't know how many calories you put in, you can take, type of lettuce. Is it green leaf? Is it iceberg? Is it red leaf? Is it romaine? Romaine is a little bit more calories, and how much you're putting in. Now, if you're decent with math, and my understanding you're all realtors, if you're decent with math, I'm sure you're understanding basic mathematics. If you're having in, 94 grams, yeah, if you're having 94 grams of this, you just multiply it by 2 essentially. But this tells you how many calories there are. And let's say you put in, tomatoes. Again, same idea. Red tomato, a medium one at about 123 grams is about 22 calories. And, they give you some basic modifications here. Use common sense, use your judgment, calculate how much you're doing. But if you're making a salad and there's tomatoes, there's lettuce, there is, you put a little bit of olives in there, you put some croutons in there, you will have to calculate each individual part of what you're putting in and add it together. Now, this is very tedious at the beginning. I'm not going to argue against it. I've done this for myself and it's incredibly tedious at the beginning, but we as people tend to be, creatures of habit. So, after about 2 or 3 weeks, you'll find that your diet tends to repeat with certain amounts of foods. So you might have a salad maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and it's a very similar salad. And again, these are rough estimations. You're not going to get down to the exact amount, but you have a general idea of how much you're taking in. But the key thing you want to take taken with this is that you want to add up each individual part, how much of it, and that'll give you your calorie intake per that meal, essentially. And it's everything you eat. If you have a salad, you have to count that in. If you're having like, again, water, 0 calories, seltzer water, 0 calories. If you're having like some juice or some soda or like a smoothie, you have to calculate those calories into that meal and see what your total daily intake is. And just to give you an example, if you put in like, like a sandwich, and that's, like 2 slices of bread, some lettuce there, but sandwich, and they'll give you different ounces. One sandwich is about 252 calories. Keep in mind that once you're adding more stuff to it, the calories increase. And the sandwich, they don't have this written out for you, but they're thinking probably 2 slices of bread, some lettuce, some tomatoes, some deli meats, and it's telling you what the calories are. Very good thing, and you can probably go online and, find apps through the App Store or the Google Play Store. There are different apps that you can do. Some of them require you to sign up for stuff. They mostly tend to be free. You can do a calorie counter. They will also have their own sort of, some of them have their own kind of calorie guide in terms of, general guide on how much calories you're taking in. But you can look to see which one that works well with you. But the key thing is you want to be consistent with that guide, because if you go from Google to one and then you go to the guide for the other, they might be calculating things different ways. So the best thing is to find things you can stay consistent with. And where I found it that even all of my patients, even the ones that are in underserved communities, they all tend to have a smartphone, which is great because it gives us a common area that we can refer to them for resources. So Google is a good option. If you can't think of anything else, but if you prefer something else, just stay consistent with it, essentially.
Dr. Wu,
Yes.
I just wanted to mention, when you were talking about that, I've been using this app for the past several years, and it's free. You can download it. It's called MyFitnessPal, and it will track it. It tracks calories, but it also tracks your fats, your sugars, your salts, because I'm on a low sodium diet myself. So I always have to watch the salt. So it's free. They do have a premium if you want to pay for things, but I just don't. But it's called MyFitnessPal.
Yeah, I think every app has a premium version now, unfortunately. But yeah, I did see that. That's a very good thing. I think it had like 10 million downloads, one of the better rated trackers, actually. So I know I don't work for them, obviously, so there's no monetary thing here. But just to find out what works for you, that seems to be a very popular option. Definitely try that. If it's free, go ahead and use that one. But yeah, just keep in mind that the calories you're taking in will increase depending on what you're adding on. All right, the next one. Okay, so exercise. So this is the other part of weight loss. So exercise, I think a lot of people understand the fact that if you exercise, you will lose weight. I think what most people don't realize is that, again, going back to that original idea, body is very, very efficient at using up the calories. We have not gotten beyond that part in our evolution. So I try to break this down. These are general estimates. If you're heavier or lighter, you'll probably use different amounts. But this is a like a general breakdown of how much you are expected to burn per mile, essentially. So if you're walking, you burn about 100 calories per mile. If you're jogging, better, but not that much more. Again, you're going from 100 to 123 kilocalories per mile. If you're biking, again, biking is very good. It's very good at, relieving stress on your joints. So if you, can't walk, you can't run, your knees hurt, and you can't deal with that extra weight, biking is a very good option, but you're only burning about 50 to 60 calories. That's because, again, your body is efficient at using up the calories, and the bike is a way of magnifying the energy usage. We're converting a stepping motion to a rolling motion, just much more efficient. But again, if that's all you can do, you can do that, but keep in mind that the calorie use is much lower for biking than anything else. Swimming, very high in calorie intake, because swimming, you're doing a couple of things different than walking. One is that you're using your entire body. Walking, predominantly you use your legs, your butt, your lower body muscles, your core muscles to keep yourself stabilized. And you're also walking through a less denser medium. You're walking through air, essentially. By swimming, you have, again, we're not made to swim. We're not the best swimmers. So swimming, you're using your upper body, your lower body, your core. You're also going through a medium that is magnitudes of times much denser than water. So if you swim for a mile, you can burn about 300 calories. Now, I'm not the best swimmer, so it's very hard for me to swim a mile. And I think for most people, very, very hard to swim a mile, or even to get access to the ability to swim a mile. So again, this is just to tell you that, different amounts of activities will give you different amounts of energy usage. But overall, even overcoming all those forces, if you're swimming for a mile, which in my mind is a lot of work, you're only burning about 300 calories. Now, keep in mind what you're taking. If you're looking at the average intake of a McDonald's burger, which is 400 to 500 calories, you have to swim for about 2 miles or walk for about 5 miles to get rid of that one burger, essentially. So what I'm trying to show with this is that it's much, much easier to take in calories than it is to use it up. A lot of the statements that I get from patients, you know what? I might be eating a lot more, but I can just work it off by exercise. I'm like, okay, great. Are you walking 10 miles a day? So you have to keep in mind the magnitude of differences from the calorie intake and also the expenditure that you get. Again, just going back to the original idea, your body is very efficient at using calories, because if it wasn't efficient, we would not have survived as a species to the current process right now. Okay, so diet. I'm just showing you that there are so many diets out there, and even since when I was in college, there have been so many different diets, and since then it's just exploded essentially. So from a medical standpoint, they have done studies and they have found that commercial diet plans do actually work. So things like Jenny Craig, Weight Watchers, I'm sure there's tons of out there, but commercial diet plans do actually work. My opinion on looking at the different diet plans, going from intermittent to keto to paleo to, I had to look up what this was, the pescatarian. This is a fish and egg and dairy based diet. I can't pronounce. I haven't heard until I looked up this picture yesterday. There are just so many diets out there. My key take on the diet is that what kind of diet plans offer you is that it offers you a structured way of keeping track of your calorie intake. Whatever diet plan that you take, you pick. If you pick a diet plan where you're taking in more calories than you're using out, you're not going to lose weight. There's not going to be a scenario where you're taking in, a bunch of protein and you're taking in, 3,000 calories of protein per day and only using up 1,500 calories. You're not going to lose weight by just taking in high amounts of a specific food. Your intake has to undertake your output for you to lose weight. Okay, better way of saying that, your output has to overtake your intake. Probably a better way to say that. A little more confused the way I said it. But the diet plan offers you a way to structure it, so it's much better for you to keep track of your calorie intake. And also, pick a diet plan that works for you. If you like meat, a vegetarian diet is not going to work. If you despise red meat, a paleo diet is not going to work. If you love fish, the fish-based diet may work for you. If you love fruits and vegetables, eating raw fruits and vegetables may work better for you. The key thing is you want to pick a diet plan you can stick to, and you want to still keep track of those calories. And keep in mind the calories that we gave you is actually for maintaining weight. Usually what I recommend for my patients for weight loss is that you want to take in, for women, minimum you want to take in probably about maybe 1,400 to 1,600 calories per day. For men, maybe 1,600 to 1,800 calories per day. That's a good starting step. The other thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to go below 800 calories. Again, these are general guidelines, not going to be specific for every person, but you don't want to go below 800 calories. That is an extreme starvation mode for the body. And at that point, the body will become even more efficient in using energy. So now you're burning much less calories than what you're doing. So again, between 800 to about 1,600 as a general for probably all genders is a good number. But usually for women, 1,400 to 1,600 calories. For men, 1,600 to 1,800 calories to try to lose weight. You can work your way down from there. It might vary from person to person. So that's the general diet I would recommend for most people. Now, something else to help us, this is, again, something we give for diabetics, but it also works for the general population, is the portion control per meal. So this is kind of getting down to the nitty-gritty of what they do per each meal. So they recommend, 3 meals per day, and they recommend, that each meal is consistent of 4 servings. Now, everybody's a little bit different. Somebody who's 6'5" is not going to have the requirement of somebody who's, like 5'2". So we say 1 serving is the size of your palm, essentially. So 1 serving is the size of your palm. Again, the palm, not the fingers, just the palm part, but 1 serving of a carbohydrate. Those are your bread, your grains, your pasta. Again, the darker ones tend to be a little bit better. But 1 serving of carbohydrate, 1 serving of a lean protein. If you're a vegetarian, obviously you won't be eating meat, other forms of protein. Ideally, chicken, turkey, fish, steamed, cooked, broiled tend to be a little bit better. Beef is not always the best, and the reason being is that regardless of how much fat you cut off the beef, you're always going to see, and you can even see it here, there's a little bit of marbleized fat in the beef. And that's just what gives beef part of its distinctive flavor. So beef is not the best thing to have, red meat for other reasons, but beef, just from a pure nutritional standpoint, there's always going to be some fat in the beef, essentially. But again, 1 serving of a lean protein. And you want 2 servings of a leafy or a stalky vegetable. Again, keep in mind that mushy stuff, potatoes, corns, peas, you can have them, but that has to count towards the carbohydrate section. You can't say, you know what, I'm not going to have a serving of a slice of bread, you know, a serving of corn, a serving of potatoes. You think, you know what, oh, I'm getting, you know, a carbohydrate and 2 vegetables, but you're really getting 3 servings of carbohydrates, actually. Again, leafy, stalky vegetables, higher in fiber, lower in calories, and it keeps you fuller for longer periods of time, so you're not inclined to eat as much. All right, so losing weight. Again, what I want to say with this is it goes back to the original equation. You know, energy and mass are interconverted. You don't get rid of them. But losing weight, most people understand the idea that if you take in more calories than you use up, then you gain weight. If you take in less calories than you use up, then you lose weight. I think what most people don't know, though, is the amount that you can potentially lose weight in terms of a very, very minor imbalance. So, for example, if you took in 100 extra calories per day, so say you are using up, you know, 1,500 calories and you're taking 1,600 calories. That extra 100 calories, which isn't a lot, that's like a slice of bread, a can of soda, a slice of cheese, you know, like half a bagel even. But that 100 extra calories over the course of a week will add up to about, you know, half a pound to a pound of weight, essentially. Probably over the course of a year, that's anywhere from 25 to 50 pounds. So, you know, a small imbalance over a long period of time can lead to a lot of weight gain. And a lot of patients I get for weight loss, you know, they're amazed, you know, why I've been gaining, you know, like 20 pounds over the last year. I'm like, well, you know, that's somewhat expected. Again, a small imbalance can lead to a lot of weight gain over a long period of time. The good news is the same is true for the opposite also. That same imbalance will lead to almost the same amount of weight loss over the same period of time. So again, if you were to take in 100 calories less per day and you extrapolate out over the course of a week and then a year, 25 to 50 pounds you can potentially lose just by having that negative balance. And I'll admit the hardest part about this is going to be trying to figure out how many calories you're actually using up. There is no logistically simple way to do that. You know, they have ways to estimate essentially. So, you know, if you have smartwatches, you know, Apple or Android or Garmin, you know, whatever you use, a lot of them will have apps where based on your activity, based on your weight, based on your height, you know, if you keep it on you the whole day, it will try to estimate how many calories you are using up. It's a good indicator. I always say, you know, the more you do, the better. But it's a good indicator, but it's not going to be the perfect. The only way to really do it is to do like a closed system measurement, which is incredibly cumbersome. You have to be in like essentially a bubble for 24 hours, and that only deals with the activity you did for that one day. So very impractical. But you know, like the smartwatches are a good way to, you know, start out to estimate how many calories you're using. But the key thing is, especially with the way that the current you know, epidemic with obesity, you really want to work on the calorie intake. It's much more easier to estimate that, much more easy to control that also. Yeah, and the last thing I have to say is, you know, keep at it. This is the main thing with weight loss. You know, weight loss, healthy weight loss, is a marathon. It is not a sprint. You know, and I'll give an example for myself. You know, when I was in college, you know, a girl that I was interested in mentioned I was gaining a little bit of weight, and I was really interested in her. So I went on a huge weight loss program. I think I ate nothing but like pomelos and beans for like, you know, 3 months. I was running like 3-4 miles a day, and you know, I lost a lot of weight. I went from like 170 pounds to like 135 pounds, and I felt great. You know, I finally got the runner's high. But it really was not sustainable. You know, after, you know, I got together with that girl. You know, she didn't have the same weight issue that I had. You know, she was like 5'4", like 105 pounds. Like, so she eat whatever she wants. She's had very lucky with her metabolism. You know, but she liked to eat burgers, and she liked to eat, you know, like fried foods, and she likes to go off like nice foods. And, you know, I went with her, and you know, I gained a lot of that weight back. You know, and you know, over time, you find the diet. And I've tried keto, I've tried paleo, I've tried different things. You know, but eventually I found a diet that, for the most part, works very similar to the updated food pyramid. You know, much higher in you know, vegetables, much higher in fruit, less in carbohydrates. I do eat a little more proteins than I probably should based on that thing, you know, but I'm still okay with that. You know, you find a diet where, you know, I'm not trying to be sticked, and I'm not trying to be like the next, you know, He-Man or something. But you know, like I'm maintaining a good weight, you know, like 140, 150, you know, healthy for my height. So yeah, the key thing is you want to make small. That's the other thing I wanted to mention. You want to make small changes over a long period of time. And I don't expect you tomorrow. So you know what? I'm eating nothing but salads and eggs, you know, and water forever and ever. You can probably do it for a few months if you have really good willpower, but it's not going to be a sustainable thing for most people. If you just made one small change, like, you know what, I'm going to cut out 1 can of soda per day, or I'm going to cut out half a can of soda per day, make it a small change every couple of weeks. One is that change will be much more accepted by your body. If you made a very large change to your energy expenditure, your body's going to wait, what the hell is going on? Your body is not going to like that. And, both from a psychological and a physical standpoint, the body will kind of resist that a little bit. Also, that type of change tends to be more long acting. So those are changes that you can keep for years and years at a time instead of, like a crash diet for, like a wedding or something. So that's all I had. Now I know I went a little bit over. And I think I finished, but I have maybe like 5-10 minutes. Is there any questions that people wanted to ask me?
There's a couple of questions that people put in the chat. One is asking about fasting. Would you recommend fasting?
So fasting. So again, fasting is one of those things where I heard about intermittent fasting. The general idea, I think, with fasting, and this is my personal opinion, is that if you're fasting, you're reducing the amount of time that you're eating, essentially. There's a joke that I heard on, I forget which show, it was one of the comedy shows, where they're all talking about different diets, and one girl says, well, I have a diet where I'm allowed to eat whatever I want for 5 minutes a day. I'm like, okay, we all get a joke with that. The thing is, it's just, if you're, and you can probably do that if you're only allowed to eat whatever you want for 5 minutes a day. If you are trying to pack in as many calories as you want and try to eat that over 5 minutes, you're still not going to be able to take in that many calories. So with fasting, I think the general idea with fasting is that you are just limiting the amount of time that you're eating. But if you say you fast for 8 hours, again, we all kind of fast for 8 hours when we go to sleep, to be honest with you. But say you fast for 8 hours during the day, and then you take in, 2,400 calories in the 4 hours you have remaining, you're still going to gain weight because you're taking more calories that you're using up. I think the general idea with fasting is that and actually with fasting from a purely scientific standpoint, if you're fasting and you're trying to put your body into a starvation mode, the idea with fasting, I think what they're trying to sell is that if you're fasting and your body does not have access to carbohydrates and sugars, then the body will utilize fat as a source of weight loss. But keep in mind that if you're taking in more calories, once you take in the calories back, the body will say, you know what? I may be using fat for these 4 to 5 hours, but at the same point, once I have the calories, I'm going to regenerate that fat because now I've used up my fat supplies. So fasting, if you lower your calorie intake with the fasting, that's perfectly fine. But don't expect that, you fast for 4 hours a day and you eat whatever you want for the rest of the day, that you're still going to lose weight if you're overall taking in more calories. Again, it's that balance that we're talking about. And again, I think with the diets, it really is just that it allows certain people to stick to a diet better, and it gives them a more regimented way of losing weight, as opposed to saying, you know what, I'll just kind of watch what I eat, which is a very kind of unfortunate statement that doesn't lead to any results. So it gives you a way of kind of focusing in on something to do. Essentially, you're having some action, but again, the key thing is you really want to take in less calories than you're using up. So whatever diet, helps you get to that, go with that diet. But again, you still have to watch the calories.
I think, Virginia, did you have a question? You have your hand up.
Yes, well, first of all, thank you, Dr. Wu. This was really, really good. Very, very interesting. And I like the fact that you touched upon, when you went over the diet.
Oh, I'm sorry for 1 second. Yes? Come in. Okay, I think, sorry, I'm just knocking on the door. Sorry, go ahead.
When you went over the diet slide, you kind of like put everything out there, and you said something very important, which is, almost everything would work if you're structured. And I actually saw a video yesterday on YouTube of a 91-year-old woman. She's Asian. And I was surprised to see the way that she ate throughout the day. We've been told, oh no, you must eat 5 times a day, small meals. And then there are other people that say, no, fasting, that really works. And then other people will say, you know what, I'm healthy and I've been eating like this my entire life, which is like I eat 1 meal a day. Whatever works for you, I believe is the way to go. Because when I saw this woman and what she ate for breakfast, her largest meal was breakfast. And it happened at 7 a.m. in the morning. And it was, and you know, Asians, you know, they would eat fish for breakfast. She had salmon every day and a whole bunch of smaller plates of vegetables, you know, and a lot of fermented food, which is one of the things I wanted to ask you. Are fermented foods really good for you? Because that was one of the things that she ate in the morning. The rest of the day, it was almost like tapering down on what she ate. And she only ate 2 more times. And one of them, lunch, was a banana with a fermented drink.
I mean, that's really more of a question for a nutritionist, but what kind of fermented food was she eating? Was it like
it was an Asian product? No, but the meals in the morning, she had a lot of little things besides the salmon, and some of them were fermented. Like, I guess, you know, my daughter lives in Japan, so I know that she eats the fermented soybean, you know, and
oh, gotcha. Okay,
like
I was wondering what you were talking about. Now that kind of, there is a balance in there in terms of the fact that the problem with a lot of you know, and you know, my parents are from China, and I'm originally from China. A lot of the fermented foods it's not so much that the fermenting process is bad, just that there's a lot of additives to it.
Exactly.
For Chinese food. So I think, again, from a purely weight loss standpoint, shouldn't really matter what it's there. It's just a matter of how many calories are in that food product, essentially. If you're using it up, you should be okay. From more of a health standpoint, I think more of the fact that because there's a lot of additives, generally ultra processed foods tend to be less healthy because there's a lot more chemicals in there. And again, if it works for her, it works for her. I'm sure from a weight loss standpoint, she could be perfectly fine. But you know, are her pressures high, or is her cholesterol high? That's a separate process in terms of nutrition, not so much weight loss. I would say generally, you know, a well-balanced diet. I know it's a little bit of a, you know, thing that people always say, but a well-balanced diet is always better because it's not so much that you're getting a little bit of everything. You're not getting too much of anything either. In truth of the matter, too much of anything is bad for you. You know, you need a little bit of salt, you need a little bit of, you know, protein, you need a little bit of this, you need a little bit of that. But if you get too much of something also, it's also very bad for you. Again, there is too much of the good things. Anything where the body gets too much of that it can't get rid of is bad for you. So I wouldn't say make an entire diet based just on fermented food. There's probably other reasons not to do that. But again, if weight loss is your goal, again, the calorie intake. Other thing about that actually that I wanted to talk about, that I forgot to talk about with that, I've also heard a lot of things where people are saying that, you know, if you eat less at night, that you will lose more weight. Sort of true and false. What it comes down to, again, you know, total daily intake. If you used up, you know, 2,000 calories a day and you ate 500 calories a night, you're going to lose weight regardless of how many times you eat that 500 calories. But it's just that after you eat at night. So, you know, I think the issue that most people eat a heavy meal for dinner, and that's just, I think it's culturally, that's what, you know, people do in America, and you know, I do that also. But it's very hard to burn off those calories because you're not that active after your final meal. You know, most people don't think, you know what, let me eat dinner and, you know, go for a 5-mile jog. You know, so let me eat dinner. Now it's time to unwind. I had a hard day. I'm gonna sit, I'm gonna watch some TV. I'm gonna read something. You know, it's very hard to work off that big calorie bolus towards the end of the day with the limited time that you have to, you know, do stuff for the rest of the day, essentially. All right,
and I just wanted to let you know also that this particular woman that I was watching, she started her exercising and being conscious at the age of 61. And she's now 91, which was amazing. I loved seeing that because it means that you can actually become aware of this when you retire and you have more time to exercise.
That's
you know,
true.
which is what happens to a lot of people. They have, you know, I don't have time. Well, you know, if you're in your 60s or even in your 70s and you have the time now, you can actually start doing weight training and eating better and doing all that and extend, you know, help extend your life. Thank you, doctor.
It's definitely never too late. I'm sorry, I actually have a patient that's
Okay, well, listen, Dr. Wu, I want to thank you so much. It was so informative. And we appreciate all of the information. I just want to share real quickly, our next breakfast with benefits is February 1st, property tax due diligence. We do expect a large group for this. We all want to know how we can reduce our taxes. So, but Dr. Wu, thank you so much. And I will be sending out the recording either this afternoon or tomorrow.
Sure. If you want to invite me to that also, I would love to know about how to deal with property taxes too.
Oh, okay. Well, if you want to join, I'll send you the link.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for having me. Thank you for your time, and you know, hope it was informative. And I hope you know you got, again, I think the key thing you take, the two things I want you to take away from this is, one, the calorie intake is probably gonna be the main focus. You take in less than you just want to take in less than you use up, and you will lose weight over time. And also just keep at it. Find something that works for you and stick with that. Okay.
Great. Thank you so
Right.
much.
Bye,
Have a great
everyone.
day.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.